Welcome back, everyone. In this video we are going to take a look at the 6 press marks that we just spoke about in the previous video. So before we jump into that, let's view Prebatch to see where we're at this point, just as a little reminder. So we'll view Prebatch. We can see that we have our same product we've been dealing with. We have our 2D barcode at the top with our image stamp that we laid down. We have the 2 text stamps on each side of the page. We have our box outline around the custom box with a linear barcode and then some text with an eye mark. So now we want to look at the 6 different press marks that we spoke about earlier. So what we're going to do is open up our layout. Now I do have it down below open here in Notepad++, but remember you can always get to your product templates by going to Designer, Configuration Browser, and then we'll just come down to this layout that we're working with, right click on it, and select Open in Notepad++. So here you will see I've added a new element called press marks. Actually the press marks element was there, but we've added 6 new elements here and they're all commented out right now. And I just want to go through these one at a time. We'll talk about each one, reprocess our order, and then see the output that it generates within the Prebatch content. So to do that, we're going to take this opening comment mark and we're going to drop it down below our first press mark that we're going to talk about, which is a corner cut mark. Now remember that a corner cut mark is the mark that places itself on all 4 corners of the Prebatch output. So there's only a few properties we need to specify here. The first of which is the color that we want to use, and we're going to use black. Next, we need to specify the length that's going to be used for that corner cut mark. And we're just going to do 18. That's a pretty standard length that we use. The weight specifies how thick the line is that's going to be used for the corner cut marks. And then the offset is how far off of the box that we're positioning these marks relative to do we want these marks to be. Now in this case, I want them to be basically right on the trim box, which is what we're relative to, so I'm just going to leave the offset to 1. So we'll go ahead and save this. Come back into our UI, and then let's reprocess this at Prebatch so that change will get picked up. And once our reprocess finishes here, we'll view the output and see exactly what that did. So here we have our output, and as you can see at each corner, we have these corner cut marks that have been placed. Now, they're relative to the trim box, which you can't see because we turned off the box outline for that. But right here where these 2 lines come together, they're touching the trim box, which goes all the way around just the inside edge of this image that we're looking at. So there we have corner cut marks, and these are really handy because again, with one simple line of code, we can place a cut mark or a little cross corner cut mark at each corner of the Prebatch output. So let's go ahead and close our output. We're going to come back to our layout, and let's go on to our next press mark. So we'll take this opening comment, paste it after the cut mark. Now, the difference between a cut mark and a corner cut mark is the cut mark will only place a single mark. So not the 2 lines that make up the corner cut mark, but just a single mark, either vertical or horizontal, based on a few factors that we'll talk about here in a second. So once again, we have to specify a color, so we'll use black. The length, I'm still going to go 18. Weight, we'll leave it 1. Offset, still going to be at 1. We're still relative to the trim box, but this time we need to specify a side, an X and Y value. So the side for this particular mark that I'm going to lay down, I'm going to use side left. We're going to use an X position of -18, and the reason for that is I want the mark to start 18 points to the left of the left side edge, because I want the cut mark to be in the white space, but then come into the content a little bit. The Y position I'm going to leave set to 0, and the reason for that is I'm using the auto center attribute. Now remember, if we have auto center set to true, and I have a side of left or right, then the mark is going to be positioned between the top and bottom edges. If this side were to be top or bottom, then the mark would be positioned between the left and right sides of the content. So we'll go ahead and save our output, or save our XML file. We'll come back to the UI and reprocess once again at pre-batch. So once this gets done processing here, we will come to View, View Pre-Batch, and here over on the left-hand side you can see this single cut mark. Now that's not really appropriate, I guess, for the content that we're looking at here. You typically wouldn't want to put a cut mark that's going to come right through the center of your content. Again, this is all just for demonstration purposes so you can see exactly how these press marks are used and the type of attributes that we have available when placing them within our layouts. So we'll go ahead and close this out. Return to our layout XML, and let's move on to our next press mark, which is a trim mark. Now, a trim mark is just like a cut mark as far as the properties that you can specify. The difference between a cut and a trim mark is this. With cut marks, they're always going to go perpendicular to the side that you are relative to. And with a trim mark, they're always going to go parallel to the side that you're relative to. So we're going to go ahead and save this here, but first let's talk about the attributes. Again, like I said, they're essentially the same as a cut mark. So color, we're going to use black. Length, I'm going to make this 2 inches long just so we can kind of see from a demonstration perspective what it's actually doing. So we have this 2-inch length. The weight, I'm going to leave at 1. Offset still at 1. We're still relative to the trim box. The side, in this case, is going to be top, and I'm specifying a specific X value of 200. So it's going to be 200 points in to the right relative to that trim box. The Y position is 0, which means it's going to be right on the line of the trim box. And auto center, in this case, we're not doing, so we're leaving that set to false. So we'll head back over to the UI, reprocess this at pre-batch, and we'll go ahead and view our pre-batch. And right up here at the top we can see this mark. Since we told it to lay down a trim mark and our side was relative to the top, a trim mark is going to go parallel to that side that we're working with. So it's going in the same direction parallel to that top edge. Compare that to the cut mark, which we said was side left. That mark is going perpendicular to the side that we're dealing with. So depending upon which element you choose, a cut mark or a trim mark, and which side you are relative to for that mark, the lines could be going one of two directions, either parallel to the edge or perpendicular to the edge. So let's go ahead and close this out. We'll come back to our layout and let's move this down to the next press mark that we want to talk about, which is a fold mark. Now, a fold mark is exactly the same as the cut and trim marks that we just talked about. The attributes are the same, everything works the same, the side relativity works the same, there are no differences. The only difference between a trim and cut mark versus a fold mark is that the line that's generated is going to be a dashed line instead of a solid line. So we'll go ahead and save this, come back to our pre-batch and reprocess this once again. After the reprocess, we'll come back to view. And right through the center here, you can see this dotted line. Again, not very functional for the piece of content that we're working with because we're probably not going to fold this. But there we have our dashed line, which indicates where a fold mark would be. So we'll close this out, back to our layout again, and let's move our comment line down to the next one so we can look at an eye mark. Now, we've already seen eye marks a little bit. We have that yellow eye mark that shows up behind the text that we put on our layout in an earlier video. But we're going to add one more here, which kind of will depict what a typical registration mark looks like that a lot of finishing equipment might read after the job is submitted to press. So here we have this eye mark. We're going to leave the color set to black. Height, I'm going to have 18 points with a width of 9 points. Positioning is going to be relative, and in this case, I want it to be relative to the media box. Now the side, I'm setting to right, so my X value, I want to be from that right-hand edge, I want it to come to the left a ½ inch. So we're doing a -36 point. Now for the Y value, I want it to be fairly high on that right-hand side. So given the total height of my content, I've decided to set this at a position of 600. So remember that that Y value starts at the very bottom edge of our content, given that side is equal to right, and it's coming up the page. So we'll go ahead and save this. We'll come back to our user interface and do our reprocess so we can pick up that change. All right, so we'll come back to View, go to View Pre-Batch, and right over here on the right we have our new press mark, or our eye mark that shows up over here. Okay, so we'll close that out. One more time, we will come back to our layout, grab this comment line, paste it below, and now we have added in a drill mark. So drill mark, once again, works very similar to the rest of these press marks that we're dealing with. So we have a color of black. We have a diameter, which is a new attribute that we haven't seen before, of 18, and as the name implies, that allows you to specify in points the diameter of this drill mark. Positioning is relative. I'm setting it relative to the trim box. This time we're going side bottom, and the X value, which is going to come from the lower left corner of the trim box, we're going to move to the right on the X-axis, 400 points, and then on the Y, which is going to come from the bottom of the trim box going up, since it's a positive value, we're going to move 144 points, or about 2 inches. So we'll save that, come back down to our UI, perform one more reprocess at pre-batch, and then let's view our pre-batch and see where that shows up. So here we have this circle, which indicates a drill mark, right below our fold mark. Now, remember that in an earlier video, around page 5, we told the system to pad in a blank page. So if we come down to that, so here's page 5, here's our blank page. This just provides a quick way where we can see these marks a lot easier. So just as a quick review, we have our corner cut marks that we placed with a single line of code that allowed us to put a mark, offset the trim box on each corner of the output that displays. We have our fold mark, which is in the center here, and remember the difference with the fold mark is it's a dotted or a dashed line. We have our trim mark, which was relative to the top side, so it goes parallel to that top side edge. We have a cut mark that was relative to the left side, and it's going perpendicular to that left edge, since that's what we set it relative to. We have our eye mark that we placed over here, which represents a typical press registration mark that you might see. And then lastly, we have our drill mark, which we placed down here below the fold mark. And again, the only big difference with the drill mark compared to these other press marks is it has an attribute for specifying the diameter of that. So that covers all of the 6 press marks that you can add to a layout. So this video is starting to run a little bit long, so we're going to go ahead and end this one here, and I will see you in the next video.